Is there a strategy that'll help you grow your company faster? CEO Sales Strategies is an investigative business podcast for entrepreneurial people who never stop asking questions. Highly acclaimed sales revenue growth expert Doug C. Brown interviews CEOs, business owners, and professionals who serve them to uncover and share actionable tips and methods behind their bulletproof sales strategies. Topics covered on the show include their failures, struggles, secrets, and processes that help them succeed in selling millions to billions of dollars of their products and services, all with the sole aim of helping you grow your business. If you are eager to know the most effective sales secrets from the A players of the game, then the CEO Sales Strategies podcast is certainly the place to be.
Hey everyone, welcome to the CEO Sales Strategies podcast. This is Doug C. Brown, your host, bringing you another amazing guest. Her name is Mary Grothe. That's Grothe. She owns a company called House of Revenue, and we're going to talk a lot about fractional CROs and CMOs for growth, sanity, and scale. And, you know, when you hear fractional, some people go, whoa, wait a minute. Why would I want a fractional person? Well, believe it or not, many times, not always, but many times, that's the first greatest place to start. You limit your available resources, right? And you are using them to a expeditious fashion on how to, I screwed that up. Sorry, guys. Let's start this all over. Hey, everyone. This is Doug C. Brown with the CEO Sales Strategies podcast, bringing you another amazing guest. Her name is Mary Grothe. It's Grothe. She owns a company called House of Revenue. We're going to talk about fractional CROs, CMOs, how you use them for scale, sanity, and revenue growth in your business. Now, sometimes when people hear fractional, they go, whoa, why would I want somebody that's fractional? That's kind of part-time, isn't it? Well, yes, but you're bringing expertise to the table. So a lot of times they can do things that full-time employees can't do because they have these expertise. They have this availability of resources, then they can just like bring it right to your company, right? So we're going to talk about how to do this, why to do this, why it makes sense, when it doesn't make sense. And what we're going to do is we're going to give you the good, the ugly, the in-between, right, of all of this. Mary's very skilled at doing this. And I wanted to bring her on because a lot of companies, when they grow to a certain level, they get stuck and they have blind spots and they can't figure out how to grow. And when you have let's take chief revenue officer that's fractional that comes in, they're looking at this thing holistically from a 360 view. So it's kind of like hiring a consultant, but somebody in there doing the work and driving things forward for you and giving you a growth plan long-term. It is absolutely phenomenal when you do this type of thing. So let's go talk to Mary and we'll talk all about it. Here we go. Mary, welcome to the CEO Sales Strategies podcast. Thanks so much for being here.
Hey, thank you for having me.
So we're going to talk today about hiring fractional CROs and CMOs and how you do this for growth, keep your sanity, and how you scale your business. And you're an expert in this area. So let me just ask straight out, why does somebody want to hire somebody fractional versus somebody just full-time?
Fractional has a time and place where the strategy makes sense. Typically, where we see it be successful is where we play, which is in second stage scaling companies. So typically, once you get through startup scale is very chaotic. You do whatever you need to do in order to break through the different revenue thresholds, get your product market fit. But typically what happens is a company will plateau and then they'll be stagnant, maybe in that 3 to 5 million range, maybe a little bit more. And they keep trying to do things like bring in a new VP of sales. That didn't work. Let's get a marketing agency. Well, we've spent 80 grand there and haven't seen a return. Let's, fill in the blank, right? They do these little silo fixes, little band-aids, and nothing really moves the needle. So then they start saying, well, maybe we should hire a chief revenue officer, somebody to really own revenue that can take us to the next level. Well, there's a few flaws in hiring a full-time CRO or a full-time CMO when you're in that second stage scale, when you're looking to embark on that, especially when you're coming out of a revenue plateau. Hiring a CRO alone or hiring a CMO alone, that's not going to scale your company. A great CRO, one of the first things they're going to want to do is build a team around them, which can be very expensive. Additionally, some of the challenges with a CRO is that it's an underdeveloped role. It's only been popular for the last 5 or 6 years, really mainstream in the last couple of years. And the biggest mistake people make with hiring a CRO is that they find a glorified sales leader and give them the title. But a real CRO is holistic. They understand go-to-market strategy, brand strategy, marketing, sales, customer success, revenue operations. And so big mistake for a lot of people when they go to hire that CRO is they're hiring somebody with a great track record in sales and sales leadership, but they don't understand holistically the entire revenue engine. So there's a fault point. If you go the CMO route, typically in that second stage scaling company, it's too early to hire a CMO alone without it being tied to an overall revenue strategy. Marketing dollars are so important in that second stage scale. Marketing needs to make you money. And some of the great chief marketing officers out there could perform very well in brand strategy. Many of them have worked with multi-million dollar budgets, but oftentimes when you're in a second stage scale company, a CMO is kind of an unnecessary hire if they're not tied to a revenue component so that you can get the results on that. So full-time challenges, they're expensive. There's also a big risk on them. Did you know that the average tenure for a CMO full-time role is 18 months, and then for a CRO is 19 months? And I may have that backwards, one or the other. The thing is, they're not set up for success. Oftentimes, when they come in, the organization needs a lot fixed inside of their revenue ecosystem. And they're put in and they're expected to perform immediately. And then they want to build a team. And then the company may not have a budget for the team. So then they're looking at agencies, supplementing some of the work. And there is just a fragmented strategy, and it's expensive and it may not work. Fractional allows the company to hire in talent without the full-time expense, the burden, the overhead. And typically with fractional CROs, at least how we see it at House of Revenue, is that these people need to be holistic. They need to understand go-to-market strategy, brand strategy, marketing, sales, CS, and revenue operations. And they need to have that time where they can come in and assess and audit and research before building and testing, then optimizing and scaling. So typically when it's a fractional engagement, you are getting higher level, better talent for a fraction of the cost, who's able to come in more of a lower risk environment. Anywho, long answer. There's a lot to discuss here, but the pros will definitely be to protect your investment by having someone fractionally when you're in that very pivotal time in a decision to rework your go-to-market strategy to go to scale versus potentially falling risk to just hiring some glorified sales leader.
Okay, so that makes a lot of sense to me. So when I go into a company, for example, and they're asking me to raise their revenue or fix a sales problem or whatever, it's funny. Sometimes people come in and go, train my sales force, just train them. Right. And I'm like, are they trainable? Right. They're like, what do you mean? Everybody's trainable. No, not everybody has the will to want to be trained. Right. So go in and let's, for basic words, do an audit. So when a CRO, let's stay with CRO, then we'll go to CMO. When a chief revenue officer that's fractional comes in there, what I'm hearing is they have this holistic view. They're supposed to anyways. They're looking at all kinds of ways to drive new revenue, existing revenue from existing sources, reconstituted revenue, whatever it might be. First thing I always do is go in there and do an audit on the company to figure out what I'm doing, right? Because it's unfair to the company just to walk in and start making adjustments. That's how I look at it anyways.
Sure.
Should a chief revenue officer come in, like, hey, I'm going to come in and audit the company first? What's the first step? In other words, should they be doing?
100% they should audit. They can't cast a vision or have any sort of clarity or understanding of how to get to the next level if they first don't perform the audit and research required to identify where the gaps are between the current state and the desired future state. A great CRO, and I am blessed to work with some of the best here, a great CRO will embody all of this when they come to the table. They're looking at auditing data, people, processes, and the market, the product, the service. They're going to want to understand the company's history, the data behind it, what's worked, what hasn't worked. They're going to want to understand the original go-to-market strategy that was successful through startup scale. And then they have this product or service and they need to go out to the market and do another benchmark and analysis to understand, is it still a product or service that the market wants? Is it at the right price point? When's the last time they did a competitive analysis? When's the last time they did secret shopping to understand if maybe their product or service is great, but what if they have unnecessary friction in the sales process? Maybe they have had adopted that predictable revenue model with the SDR, BDR, and they've got 8 steps before someone's seen a demo or a proposal, which unfortunately has caused a lot of friction with the buyer, and buyers are demanding better and they want frictionless sales processes. They want full cycle salespeople. They want to be able to part with their money when they identify that they have a solution. So maybe it's in the product or service itself. Maybe it's in the way that the brand is presenting itself to the market. They could have a great product or service, but maybe the branding is outdated. The imagery isn't right. The buyer shifted. Maybe it's a slightly different type of ICP that is interested in this product or service. What has the company done to refresh the messaging, refresh the imagery, make sure that their website creates that emotional experience where people are excited that they've landed there and they're like, oh my gosh, it's like you wrote this just for me. I'm so glad that I found you. A great CRO is going to be able to audit every component of why this company might be plateaued. It starts with that go-to-market strategy. It digs into the product or service and its viability in the market to be successful. It benchmarks it against the competition. It looks at the process in which in the buyer's journey they go through in order to make a purchase decision. But it doesn't stop there. They also need to evaluate every person on the marketing team, every person on the sales team, every person in customer success. Some of the lowest hanging fruit in customer success is the lack of differentiation, understanding, and formality between service, success, and account management. Client relationships, retention, expansion, advocacy. Usually there's a gaping hole in marketing's role in the customer life cycle and how they are helping with adoption and retention, expansion, and advocacy. So a great CRO is going to come in and they're going to audit the entire revenue ecosystem. One thing I didn't say, but last but not least, is the tech stack. What about the CRM? What about automation? How many different tools do people need to log into in order to do their job, be it in marketing, sales, or CS? What is the customer experiencing as a result of a potentially fragmented revenue tech stack? Where is their data stored differently? Can they log in? Can they get access to information? Is there a customer portal? What is the communication like? How are their, do they have a conversation bot for service? Is it all calling into a phone number? Is it a ticket base? What is it? Is it a group email? So thinking about the customer experience when it goes to the tech stack is also part or should be part of a chief revenue officer's responsibility to understand that at a macro level, at a whole. So that initial audit, all of those things need to be taken into consideration. And if a CEO hires a CRO and the expectation is go increase my revenue starting in month 1, which is so honest of how it is. They get put in these roles and it's like expected, you're a high expense. We're burning cash on you, like go produce. It's like, whoa, hold the phone. If you don't give that CRO time to appropriately assess the environment, like please allow them 1 to 2 months to get a handle on it. Then they're going to need to start implementing and building and testing before there can be optimization and scale if you want to do it the right way.
I agree with that. We're speaking with Mary Grothe, and she has a company called House of Revenue. They're at houseofrevenue.com. We're speaking about CROs, CMOs in the fractional world, giving people take time to actually get acclimated in the beginning of this. And Mary, what I've always found was what got you there. Some of what you got you there will get you to the next step, but you must alter the course. If you're going from, let's say you're $5 million and you're kind of like stuck, right? I've worked with many companies who are $5 million and they don't even have a marketing person, right? They just kind of like did it old school sales. They got out there, they're banging on doors, they're doing whatever they had to and successfully got there. But then it's like marketing is this whole like big black whole of a universe for them. And then, it's like, well, do we do traditional marketing? Do we do online marketing? And no one really owns it, right? Mm-hmm. And so traditionally what companies do is they hire a vice president of sales or something like that, right? They may have one already at that level, or if they don't, they're like, okay, my salespeople are going crazy. The owner started the company, they're moving the company forward, and now they've got a bunch of salespeople that are sort of doing whatever because there's really not much for consistency there or measurability. And now it's time to hire somebody. So they do what you just said, right? They're hiring somebody that is going to take this responsibility, and then they sort of go, okay, I'm out, you're in, take it all, right? Now, as I'm listening to all of this, I'm trying to put myself in the shoes of somebody. I built companies that big and much bigger. And somebody listening, I'm like, man, this sounds a lot like overwhelming. It's like, oh my God, I got to have all this like stuff going on at one time. I'm barely got my head above water now because I'm still constantly dealing with all the business headaches that are going on. What do you say to somebody that's like, okay, about the overwhelm component of it? Is this overwhelming, or is this something that they should be prepared to be overwhelmed, or is it something that it just sounds overwhelming and it really isn't?
It can be overwhelming. And I understand that. I've had the privilege of working in revenue for my entire career. And so I talk fast and I say a lot of things because I get to do this every day. So it's basic for me, but I do understand it can sound very overwhelming. Going back to your comment about we've not really had formalized marketing. Okay. This is a big question because people then say, well, who's the first marketing hire? And it's a challenge because marketing has 9 or 10 specialties inside of it. And you can have generalists who are decent at many things, but it's hard for a company who hasn't formally had marketing, especially at that $5 million mark, the plateau. We see this all the time. They haven't formalized a marketing department. So then they say, well, who's the first hire? Is it a CMO? I mean, they're going to be high level strategy, which we need strategy, but then who's going to do the work? So it's not a single hire, because if it's a CMO, then what do? Hire an agency, because that can be expensive. There's a lot of fault points with marketing agencies. And so is that what we do? Do we hire more of a generalist who can be good enough just to like get us posting on social media and sending a newsletter and maybe refining a little bit of messaging on our website? Like, is that a good first step? Do I need to hire 2 or 3 people out of the gate if I'm going to launch a real marketing department? It's a hard decision to make. And so what I would say is, yes, that is an overwhelming part. That audit is going to tell you exactly where your focus needs to be first. So the audit and research step is critical. Maybe you've got a great brand that doesn't need a refresh. It's just amplification. It's outbound marketing tactics. Maybe your website has been untouched for 5 years and it's not encouraging conversion and it's a mess. And maybe your logo doesn't really speak to your brand and you want that changed as well. Gosh, maybe you're even considering a whole new name for your company, which many companies have done, ourselves included. You've got to do the audit. You have to understand where the marketing and brand strategy currently is sitting. Is it helping or hindering your overall trajectory to scaling revenue? And based on the output of that audit and research, and again, a great CRO is holistic. They're proficient in branding, marketing, sales. Now, they're not going to be building websites. Like, they're not going to be super granular on a lot of the marketing components. However, they can guide and direct an overarching strategy. If the company is fortunate enough or has budget to also pair with a CMO, then the two of them, like the CMO is going to be the right hand of the CRO in that strategy. And the CMO should be able to take the overarching strategy and then dissect it, carve it up into a very tactical execution plan. And then a great CMO is going to be able to say, based on this plan with this company at our stage of growth in the market we're in, with our type of buyer, our type of product and service, we need a full-time focus on, let's say, SEO. Okay, great. Then we need to hire an SEO specialist and a content writer. Or maybe the focus is more on webinars and events. Then we need to hire somebody who's proficient in that. So go with the hire that you need the most of in that type of work for marketing, and then figure out where you can build out the rest of the function with contractors, freelancers, potentially an agency, or maybe the company is fortunate enough with enough cash flow or capital that they are able to build out a team. And then you can identify the specific roles and people that you would need to have. But building out a marketing department is overwhelming. I've been extremely fortunate to have a couple of what we call like Swiss Army knife marketers here that like happen to be wildly proficient in strategy and these execution pieces. They're super hard to come by. I wouldn't rely on having that person. Additionally, it's a high point of failure. If you have that person and then they leave, you're most likely not going to be able to quickly find a replacement for them, and you're going to be filling out those other seats.
That makes a lot of sense. It's and you can't do all marketing all at once, right? I mean, it's just not, and that's a mistake I see companies do all the time. It's like, well, we'll go out and we'll run 6 initiatives at one time. And it's like, come back to earth, because all 6 initiatives are like having 6 separate children running all around, and you got to manage those processes, and not all children want to be managed in that capacity. And it's a good way to never know what's working because you never be able to get enough time to it. That's what I have found. Now, I gotta believe, again, I'm putting myself in the listener's ears here saying, well, what's the difference between a CRO and a consultant then? Like, wouldn't, if I brought a consultant in, couldn't a consultant do this? What would be your response?
Maybe is the answer. Maybe. But a fractional CRO can be viewed as a consultant, or they can be viewed as a part-time contract worker. There's multiple kinds of fractional CROs out there. We are the latter. So we are the actual part-time contract worker. Our CROs only serve 2 clients each, and they are deeply, deeply embedded. They're sitting in on every meeting. I have a CRO right now that is making sales calls with the sales team and progressing pipeline, because the pipeline progression had completely stalled with recent inflation and market economic concerns, worries. And so she got on the phone with the salespeople and called through everything in the pipeline to move the needle, because that's what needed to be done right then and there. But she's also leading a website project and a brand refresh and messaging. So there's consultant fractional CROs that might have 5, 6, 7, 8 clients, where they really just are consulting. And that's not a bad model. It just depends on what the business actually needs. So sometimes an earlier stage company that doesn't have the budget for a full fractional CRO, they may only want to buy a few hours a week to get some of that higher level strategy, have some of that interpreted to what they need to do for tactical execution. But that could be a perfect guiding light for that startup scale. Also, fractional CROs could be great for larger companies, where the larger company needs a full-time CRO, and then maybe they are serving as a fractional as to them to bring in some of that strategy, to bring in a sounding board, to have somebody to throw ideas off of and have those higher level brainstorming conversations. There's a lot of advantages in different stages of growth to having more of a consultant-based fractional CRO versus an actual fractional CRO who goes on contract, is embedded in the organization, actually sits in the seat and is performing the work. There's a time and place for both types.
I agree. I think one of the biggest differentiations is that, to remember, if you're hiring a consultant, they make their money consulting, right? So a consultant is naturally going to want to sell more consulting time. That's really where it comes down to it. And they are handling numerous clients if they're successful as a consultant. And there's only so many clients that one can handle. I mean, when I was consulting full time, 6 is pretty much it. Right. I mean, it's you start going over that, and then everybody starts blending together a little bit more than, and even coaches can only handle so many clients. I remember one time I had 37 coaching clients a month, and it was, I couldn't do it. I mean, it was just reality. Right. But the coaching model, the consulting model, is to sell more coaching, sell more consulting. That's the business they're in. Now, what I love about fractional CROs, and don't get me wrong, folks, you guys and gals and they listening, I do still some consulting and advising still today. So it's not like I agree with you, Mary, 100%, that it depends on the need of the company. But what I love about a CRO is they're tasked with doing one thing: grow revenue, right? That's the outcome. And that's their success point, where a consultant's success point could be in multiple facets. So it really depends, again, 100% agreement on what the mission is and what we're trying to do next. So how does somebody start with this? Like, all right, I'm a $4 million company. I'm starting to go into that second stage. I've got half dozen friends that are there, right? And, I'm their friend, so they won't listen to me because they've known me for 20 years, right? I got 700 million in sales. They got 4. I get it. So friends, if you're listening to this, but they'll come to you and it'll be a different perspective because, they haven't been playing, football with you probably, right?
Yeah.
Or something like that. So what would you tell somebody that is at that level and now they want to start? What is the starting point for them? Because a fractional CMO or a fractional CRO in most cases makes sense for most companies, but they're a little afraid of, oh my God, they're only going to be there X amount of time or whatever, the thing that's coming up in their head. So what would be the starting point? How do they kind of get going at this?
My counsel in response to, oh, they're only part-time, is great fractionals. Their quality is so good that what they can do in 20 hours, a full-time person may not be able to do in 60 or 80. And that's part of your screening process to figure out who your fractionals are going to be. They need to be high urgency, high capacity. They need to have a lot of depth, knowledge, experience. Great fractionals who have scaled companies before. That's a good one to make sure they've actually done the work, maybe not just once, but twice. And also a great fractional has worked in a lot of different industries and they've also held roles, not just in the same path through their whole career. They've actually done different types of revenue roles to get that firsthand experience is really important. So when we look at that first step, the first step would be to identify where you want to go. Because if you're a company who's 4 million and meaningful growth for you is just to get above the $5 million threshold and get a little bit more profit into the business, okay, that's a different type of fractional need. If you're thinking, no, I want to go from 4 to 8 to 12 to 20, like I want to go for it, that's a different type of fractional. So figure out where you want to go. But what we've changed in the way that we work with companies is we used to ask for a 12-month commitment out of the gate. Surprisingly, we had a dozen or so companies per year say yes to that, which was a lot of faith going into, I hope this works out. And we've changed it now where we do a 40-day intro period. And that 40-day intro period, everything you heard me talk about at the top of this podcast with the audit and research and the new go-to-market strategy and recommendation, it's also coupled with a new revenue org chart so they can understand if they have the right people in the right seats today, who might need to be swapped out in a seat. And then it also has a revenue economics model, which should show 12, 24, 36 months. And it explains if you want to go from that 4 to 8 million, this is the length of time it'll take. This is the headcount it will require. These are the other investments it's going to take, marketing budget, technology budget. And then this is when you can plan to break even on this. This is when you'll be profitable. This is when you'll have more of the economies of scale. And so that type of deliverable then allows them to have a decision point to say, if this is really what it's going to take to scale, can we afford this plan? Do we finance it through cash flow? Do we go get a capital partner or get access to capital? But I think that that's a service to the community that we didn't have before, is to say, let's just spend 40 days together and answer that question for you, because it takes time to do it the right way, but then you're not hooked into a big 12-month commitment and several $100,000. Let me actually have somebody who knows how to scale tell me what it's going to take for us to scale based on our product or service, our market, our buyer, the team we already have. What are we actually going to need to do to produce results? And then allow them to be in a decision seat to say, yes, we want to take on this project or not.
So again, I'm on the choir seat with you on this one, right? Because I see people who do this incorrectly and I see people who do this correctly. So I wrote down a bunch of things here. I love what you said. Start with the end in mind. Steve Covey wrote that in a book one time, but it is so true. And many times when I'm talking to business owners or CEOs who run in their own companies, they're just trying to grow revenue. And there's nothing wrong with growing revenue. But the question is, how effective or efficient are we at growing that revenue? And that's really where this audit comes into play. What drives me a little batty is they look at those usually as expense. They go, oh my God, it's going to cost X amount of tens of thousands of dollars or whatever it's going to be, right? And they go, this is an expense. But anybody listening to this, who's been listening to this podcast for a while, trust me on this, you have blind spots that you can't see. You have been in the company, in the business, say 2, 3, 4 years, whatever it's taken you to get to that level, and you're driving and you're missing stuff. And what I have found, Mary, is when they do this particular audit, if you will, when they do the 40-day engagement, they find way more money that they're just leaving that they'll never get until it comes along that somebody points it out. And then even when sometimes people point it out, they don't engage it, right? I have a client right now that I was like, look, you could charge for what you're doing for free. Right? So they're doing a bunch of trainings, charge for the particular training, and versus doing it free, you will get revenue through the door. What will happen is not only revenue will come through the door, you get better quality clients and they'll buy more on the back end. And it took them about a year for them to take the advice. But then as soon as they did, my gosh, their show rate went up. They had, because on a free training, basically what will happen is you'll have a lower show rate because people have nothing invested. But when they pay for something, they show up. So it's the old, when they pay attention. In that case, so what's happened is their close rate has gone up on the back end as well as funding the front end. Now, to me, that's what a CRO would look at. A CRO would look at and say, okay, how do I monetize every piece of this process? And how do I find the blind spots? And let's monetize the blind spots, because those can be from the past. But a lot of people are looking so far into the future. They're always looking, how do I get new clients? How do I get new clients? How do we extend the lifetime relationship of the client? Let's look at it that way, right? And how do we engage more new clients and expand that to get more clients, right? Referrals and all types of things. But a CRO will look at that whole holistic 360 view and bring back a plan. So if anybody's sitting there going, well, this sounds great, but it's going to be an expense on the books, I'll guarantee you it's an expense on your books right now because you're missing out on stuff that somebody from the outside comes in, like Mary, like your company, will come in and look at this and say, okay, here's the next 24 months. And this is what I recommend for you to actually do that component of it. Now let's get it done. So what do you say to people when they say, I'm focusing on the money now, and I can't afford this because it's going to be an expense? What would your response be? You just carried mine. So
yeah, then I hope you enjoy 4 million, because the thing is it's going to take money to grow. And this is a very safe way. FYI, today, our 40 days priced at 40,000. That may change. That's not a lot of money when you look at the grand scheme of things, because our revenue plan for a $4 million company, historically at that size, we've been able to consistently achieve double MRR by months 10, 11, and 12. And some of the $4 million companies that we scaled back in 2020 and 2021 have now gone on to be 12, 15, 16 million. And so that investment today, to actually have a clear and honest roadmap of what it's going to take to scale, how can you put a price on that? That is, anyway, my 2 cents, but I'm biased because I created the program and I run the company. But 40 grand in the grand scheme of things, like we used to ask people for $250,000 out of the gate. I mean, it was a 12-month contract at a base price of $250,000. And it was before they ever saw the plan to know how they were going to scale.
Right.
And so now at a $40,000 price point, to have a brilliantly built, specific, executable plan based on research from the market, from the customer, from the people doing the work, all of the above, in my opinion, but again, I'm biased, that's priceless to be able to see that. So I would say that is a price point that is going to show you exactly what needs to happen. And you are correct. The audit that we do, one of the biggest areas that we'll search, well, maybe they're all big. I'm an exaggerative talker sometimes. I'm very dramatic. But one of the areas that we will audit is the current client base, because we want to understand how much of the current client base has access to how much of the product or service set. We also want to look for that low hanging fruit. Like you said, are you charging for training? Are you charging for services? Are you charging for the consulting that you're doing? And so we're going to be able to identify some of the low hanging fruit of things that are being done that currently aren't monetized. We're also going to be looking at, do they have revenue sitting inside of the base waiting to be sold? So if they have 37% of their client base has bought the core package, but the remaining amount has one or fewer ancillaries, as an example, how many ancillaries are there? What is the upsell opportunity? And we can break that out by client, by line item, to show if you sold 25% of the available upsell revenue in your base, that could be $1.2 million right there. And so what is the plan to build that out so that you're attaining that revenue? So oftentimes a $40,000 investment, whether the company would choose to work with us or not, they've got a brilliant revenue plan that they could implement themselves and avoid the fee. But of course, if that doesn't work out, we'd be here.
Yeah. And I always ask people, look long-term, because I find that at a $4 million, $5 million level, and no disrespect, I've been there, I've done this, to people who think like that, you think, how do I get to the next step versus what am I going to do over the next 3 years? And that's where we get caught as business owners, because we're looking myopically at how do I get to 5.5 if I'm at 5, right? We're not looking at what does it take for me to go from 5 to 12 in the next 3 years or 2 years or whatever it might be. And so we start to get pretty short-term thought as owners of companies, because let's face it, it's our baby and we've been growing it, and anybody can mess it up, and we don't want, there's all kinds of things that come in. But I always, if I can give one piece of advice to people who have built companies, and, you know, if it's over 368 million, I haven't been part of building it, so I'm telling you up front. But anything under that, we always had to look long-term. When we looked long-term, what happened was the growth rate scaled over a period of time. And then we had spurts where we never even thought that it would grow, you know, from like 68 million, 100 million in like a year. It was like, boom, it goes up, right? But it was all the pre-planning of the long-term thought that got us there. So if you're going to go from 5 and you want to be a 10 or $20 million company, we got to start thinking and acting like a $20 million company versus a $5 million company. It's hard. It's hard when we're at that place, you know, because sometimes when you're at 5 million, you're profitable, but it's not like you're rolling in abundance of cash, you know, depending on the type of business you're in, right? So, I mean, if you think about an auto dealer that's doing $5 million a year, there's not a lot of profit, you know, when you got a lot of base cost in the vehicles, right? So it's one of those things that I would highly beg people to look long-term, because I see that as kind of the short-term thought process that stalls them from doing what we're talking about doing, which is so important, because we can't see if we're inside, you know, if we're inside the book reading, we can only see a few letters. If we're outside the book, we can say, oh, okay, look, you're on chapter 2, you know, or whatever, because we're looking from the out in. Mary, how do people get a hold of you, your company? You know, they go, you know what, this makes sense. I want to talk to somebody.
houseofrevenue.com. You can also connect with me on LinkedIn, Mary Grothe, Grothe. And you can email us info@houseofrevenue.com.
And how many Mary Grothes are there out there? Because I bet there's not a lot.
There was a famous one who was like a racer of some sort. Did you know that, Mary Grothe? She was a competitive racer. So when you Google me, I'll cover the first couple of pages of Google search. And then this other Mary Grothe comes in. And she's like some competitive racer from the 70s and 80s or something. I don't know. I got to maybe explore her life story a little bit.
Maybe a secret twin that you didn't know you had or something. That's why I use Doug C. Brown, because Doug Brown was a professional hockey player. And and I love hockey, but a lot of people are like, did you play for the Detroit Red Wings? Or, you know, it's like, no, I'm not.
Oh my gosh.
So
Maybe in a former life, yes.
Yeah, I wish. I can't skate to save my soul because somebody pushed me and I'd go right down. So I have a lot of respect for hockey players. Mary, it's a pleasure having you here on the CEO Sales Strategies podcast. You brought a lot of great stuff. I know you made people think, and that's what the whole purpose of this is. How do we think? How do we get strategies in our company? How do we think long term, and how do we build that out? So I'd love to have you back again if you'd like to. And any last parting words for anybody? Any last thoughts?
Yeah. Let me leave you with this. Understanding who you are, who you're for as a CEO, as an executive leader, and really tapping into the purpose behind your company, the difference that you're trying to make, the problem that you're solving inside of the market, being rooted in customer need, all great revenue scale. The easiest way to do it is to pinpoint on your go-to-market strategy to really confirm that what you are doing solves a need and that you do it well. And revenue scale is potentially expensive, it's difficult, it's hard. But the easiest thing that you can do as step number one is to reevaluate who you're for and how you meet the need of the person who's willing to part with their dollars to buy your product or service. And if you can continue to invest in that, to make it unparalleled, to make it second to none, you're going to have a far easier path to scale.
Well said. I'd like to add one thing. Revenue growth is hard if you don't know what to do. And what's harder is revenue decline or revenue stagnation. Mm-hmm. Because when we have growth, then we can throw money at problems in style. And if we don't have growth, we can throw effort at problems. And then we just kind of start building a business on our back. So I believe wholeheartedly in what you said, because I've seen this happen over hundreds and hundreds of companies that I've been involved with. So Mary, thanks again for being here. And we'll have you back again.
Thank you.
Okay. Well, start with the end in mind. I'm going to say that again. Start with the end in mind. Now, I didn't make that up. Steve Covey wrote that in a book. I don't even know if Steve made that up, or the late Steve, I should say. Mr. Covey, a very smart man. But, when you look long term in your business and you look at revenue and how you want to grow it, it's a long-term play. So one of the things that I have found to be very successful is you use what I call short strategies, and then you couple them along. So if you think of SSSL, short, 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 long, short is how do you bring revenue in quickly in the first 30 days, let's say, right? So what strategies and tactics do we need to employ to do that? And then long is that takes longer than 30 days. That could be 30 days, 6 months, right? So for example, a podcast, although a great vehicle for getting your name out into the public square and getting people to listen to you, is a long-term play. You're not going to make, in most cases, I've never seen anybody make money in their first 30 days in a podcast, unless they have such a huge following that they start a podcast and they can go get, say, sponsors or something, and then they'll make some money. But it's a long-term play. It's usually going to take you 6 to 12 months before you start seeing results from your podcast. Now, results in the term of revenue. So that would be a long-term play. Short-term play could be something like referrals, right? Or dormant clients, re-engagement of the dormant clients. There's all kinds of ways of doing this. Now, a chief revenue officer who's really worth their salt will come in and show you how to do this. And a chief marketing officer can do the same on the marketing side. Now, when those two are working in tandem, woohoo, boy, you can get explosive growth in your business. But again, let's begin with the end in mind. Do you want explosive growth? But sometimes it's very quick growth. I mean, we grew one time from 68 million to 362 million in 2 years. That was high growth. And I always joke, I always tell people, hey, I had a full head of hair when we started that process. And now today I don't. So just make sure you start with the end in mind, look for expertise, talk to people just like Mary, reach out to her and see what they can do for you if you have that interest in that process. But if you want to scale, remember, having outside eyes look at it from an outside point of view gives you a full different view than you being in there day to day. And it doesn't mean that we're not smart. It means all of us miss it. day to day because we're in it. We just can't see the obvious sometimes. And that's the value of bringing outside eyes in. So if you love this podcast and you want a subject matter that you're like, you know what, hey, I would love to hear this, and maybe you think you would be the expert guest, well, reach out to us. Or if you're not the expert guest, but you want to hear something, still reach out to us. Let us know what the idea is. Send an email to youmatter, youmatter, and pose your idea. And what we'll do is we'll take a look at the idea, get back to you either way, let you know, hey, this fits or this does not fit. And then we can figure it out and we'll create an episode on that if it does fit. If you're looking to get yourself or someone you know to the top 1% of sales earners in the world, a minimum of $500,000 and up, and you want help in doing that, or you're a company and you want access to these type of people who are already well-trained elite performers, reach out to me at doug@ceosalesstrategies.com. Let me know what you're looking for. And if I have someone that I can bring to you, I'd be happy to do that. Or if you're looking to be trained on that, we certainly have the ability to do that as well. If you love this podcast, and I hope you do, please give it a 5-star review and tell your friends. The more people that listen to this, the better it is for all of us. And the more we can keep doing this and bringing you high value people and great content to help you edge over your competition. Until next time, this is Doug C. Brown with the CEO Sales Strategies Podcast. Say, go out and sell something today. Sell a lot of it. Sell it profitably. Play win-win. They win. You win. Make people happy. Makes yourself happy. We make the world a little better place. To your success.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the CEO Sales Strategies Podcast. What is something that you learned that you could act on today? Don't forget to schedule it now, or it may never get forward momentum. If you find our content valuable, please leave a favorable review and let us know what you liked. Please also share this with others if the content will help them. For our show notes, other episodes, and more interesting content and resources, please visit ceosalesstrategiespodcast.com. See you soon, and to your continued success.